Hi, this is Marvin Lindsay, and this afternoon's cup holder chat is about memory and forgetting and the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are and where we've come from. I want to go back to Juneteenth, which was Friday. I want to go back to Juneteenth as part of my 21-day racial equity habit building challenge. And maybe you learned about Juneteenth more this year than you knew before. If you know the story, you know that Juneteenth is a celebration that has primarily been observed in African American communities about the time in 1865, June 19th, 1865, when enslaved people in the Galveston, Texas area learned that they'd been emancipated, learned that they were free. They didn't know that President Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation a couple of years before, and didn't know that they were free until federal troops arrived, told them that the Civil War was over, and that they had the authority to pronounce them freed. And so this day of liberation for these enslaved people in Galveston has been remembered for years and for decades now in the African American community. Not so much in the broader community, in the white community, maybe for understandable reasons. Maybe the larger culture did not want to remember the fact that in one place, knowledge of people's liberation was withheld from them for a period of time. And this Friday's Juneteenth observance reminded me of some things that I had to learn because about race because my community and my culture had forgotten them. I didn't know that there were African American congressmen, African American mayors, African American city councilmen after the Civil War. I didn't know that. I didn't know that African Americans during Reconstruction made great strides in political equality, only to see all of those gains snatched away from them with the imposition of Jim Crow at the end of the 19th century. I just assumed that we kind of got rid of monarchy in the American Revolution, and then got rid of slavery, and then got rid of segregation in the 60s. But I didn't know about this window of opportunity that had been opened and then was shut. And there's a particularly painful aspect of that window closing that I didn't know anything about, and it has to do with what happened in Wilmington, North Carolina. I grew up in North Carolina. I grew up in Fayetteville, and Wilmington is about a 2-hour drive from Fayetteville. It's at the mouth of the Cape Fear River, where the river meets the ocean. It's a port city, and we would go to Wilmington every summer when we were at the beach. We'd see the battleship USS North Carolina, which is tied up there, and we'd go shopping downtown, and I knew Wilmington pretty well. But what I didn't know was that in the 1890s, Wilmington had black leaders, a thriving black business district, black city councilmen. There was a kind of political party in Wilmington and in other places in the South that where a progressive fusion of progressive whites and African Americans. And that political movement in Wilmington was overthrown in a spasm of violence in the late 1890s. African American leaders were run out of town. Some of them were killed. The local African American newspaper, I believe, was destroyed. It was a coup, basically. It was a coup. And a lot of these coups happened in the 1890s as part of the process of imposing Jim Crow. And I can remember learning about this in college. I didn't know about this until college, this important aspect of my local history. And I was so angry when I learned about it. And it was really eye-opening to learn that history doesn't just progress. Sometimes it regresses as well. And I think about this, the things that we forget, things that we choose to forget about the past, in light of biblical history, since I'm a minister. And one of the things that's interesting to me about the Bible as we have received it today is how the Bible doesn't forget the bad stuff. The Bible doesn't whitewash history. The biblical authors, they tell the story of the people of Israel, warts and all. They tell the story about wicked kings who oppressed their people and the people's idolatry, turning away from the Lord who had brought them out of slavery and turning toward idols. And they talk about the bad things in order to explain the worst thing of all that happened to the Israelites when they lost the land that God had promised to them and they were sent into exile. The reason why was because of this accumulated history of idolatry and oppression. That trauma of losing the land and being exiled forced the Israelites to look back into their past to figure out what had gone wrong. And it forced them to tell a truthful story of who they were and where they had come from in the effort, hopefully, so that a traumatic event like that would not happen again. And so I think that that's what's going on in our country right now. I think part of what we're undergoing right now is a reckoning with the past, remembering some of the things that we have forgotten, painful things, shameful things, things that sort of maybe cast our history in a more ambiguous light. But it's important that we remember these things so that we can address the pain that many people in our communities are feeling right now, and so that we can build a more just and equitable society in the future. So that's what I'm thinking about today, remembering the past, warts and all. Tell me in the comments, was there a time when your memory was jogged, when you learned something about the past that you hadn't known before because it had been quietly forgotten? Be interested to hear. Take care. Goodbye.